Hello there. In this video, we're going to learn about the Accounting of Disclosures log. We'll cover what it is, why it's important, when to use it, when not to use it, and where to find it. First, what is an Accounting of Disclosures log? It's a form used to track disclosures of protected health information, or PHI, made about a client in instances in which the client would not normally be aware. If you deal with protected health information, you are required to account for certain disclosures made regarding a client because legally, all clients have a right to know who has received their information. Second, let's cover when you do not need to use this log. There are several instances in which you do not have to record disclosures on this log. The most common is when you have a signed and valid authorization from the client. In these instances, the client authorized and knows of the disclosure, so you do not need to account for them. Another very common reason you do not have to record disclosures on this log are for instances of TPO, which stands for treatment, payment, or healthcare operations. That means if you're talking to another treatment provider in an effort to coordinate care for the client, you do not have to add that conversation or disclosure to this log. That does not mean that you don't have to document your interaction as you normally would in a progress note, for example. If you're talking to the client regarding their own information or their personal legal representative, you also do not need to record those disclosures on this log. There are other instances in which you do not have to record disclosures on this log, but they are not as common. You can find out more about that on the HCA intranet site, Office of Compliance homepage, by clicking on the HIPAA link and navigating the Accounting of Disclosures log menu. When do you need to record disclosures on this log? Well, the list is plentiful. Typically, if you do not have a valid authorization and the purpose of the interaction is not for treatment, payment, or healthcare operations, you should be adding those disclosures onto this log. The most common disclosures, which have not been making it onto the form but should be, are 5150s and reports for child or elder abuse, also known as CPS and APS reports. Even if you legally have a right to release information without an authorization, you still have to record it separately on the Accounting of Disclosures log, in addition to documenting the encounter in a progress note. Breaches are another common reason for adding a disclosure to this log. Breaches can consist of many things, which include, but is not limited to, misdirected fax or email, client PHI given to the wrong individual, a lost chart, or providing information against an invalid authorization. There are many other instances in which you should be adding a disclosure onto this log, but they are not as common, such as providing information to a law enforcement agency to report a crime when life or safety is endangered, or when you release information against a subpoena. If you're in doubt, remember to review the Office of Compliance intranet page and look for the HIPAA tab. The Accounting of Disclosures section contains very useful information in making the decision as to whether you should record the disclosure on the log or not. It must be emphasized that you should always be documenting all interactions and disclosures in a progress note. This training solely identifies situations in which you would also need to add those disclosures onto the Accounting of Disclosures log. Lastly, where can you find the Accounting of Disclosures log? Well, this depends on what service area within HCA you work for, and whether or not you are using an electronic health record, also known as an EHR. For behavioral health services, or BHS, most of the behavioral health clinics are using an EHR. For the BHS EHR, you can find the form by selecting the Power Forms for Charting widget on your BH Outpatient Summary homepage. The Accounting of Disclosures log in this EHR is called the BH PHI Disclosure Form, located under the Legal tab. Once you click on it, you'll see that it looks like this. Make the appropriate selection and save the form. All other areas of HCA use the paper version of this log, which can be found on the Custodian of Records, also known as CORE, intranet page. Scroll down to the bottom to find the most updated version of this log. In behavioral health services, for programs not using the EHR, the directive is to keep a copy of this log in the paper chart, even if it does not contain a disclosure. For public health services and correctional health services, the directive is to record the disclosure on the paper form and upload it into the EHR if your program uses an EHR. If you are unsure about where to keep the log and when to put it in the chart, be sure to ask your supervisor. Thank you for taking this training about the Accounting of Disclosures log. Should you still have questions, please reach out to the Office of Compliance via phone, email, or stop by anytime.